think recently I found out why so many YouTubers wear hats when recording, because when you have longer hair than just a buzz cut, it's impossible to maintain this for 1 or 2 hours when you're recording without having a mess on your head at some point. Okay, I guess that's the best that we can get. Hi everyone, it's Gregory here, Not Only Code. Today we've got a light and fun episode. We will be choosing your next programming language. I will not tell you which exactly language you should learn. Instead, I will talk about what are different things that you should pay attention to and which things you should ignore when choosing your next language. The choice eventually is yours and yours only, but I think it's good to have some criteria, some priorities that you set before you start choosing a language. Before we start, if you enjoy my videos, if you like this content, please make sure to click the like button, to click the subscribe button. It means a lot to me. It will help me a lot to reach other people. The more likes and subscribes I get, the more often YouTube shows the thumbnails of my videos to other people so that they can also learn about my content. And without further ado, let's start. Before we get to the selection process, 3 quick hints. First, learning a new language is not the only way to become a better as a programmer. If you think that, hey, I will be picking up new languages because that will make me a better programmer, yes, it will make you a better programmer, but that doesn't always make you better at your current job. Maybe what you want is instead learn a new library, learn a new framework, learn some new techniques, read some good programming book that will help you write better code. The second hint, if you want to learn some language, just do it. You don't need to ask anyone for approval. You don't need to ask people, hey, do you think that learning this language is a good idea? Just do it. If you don't like it after some time, you can stop. But just give it a try. If you think that some language is good, that you will like it, go ahead. And finally, if after some time you decide to give up the language that you're learning, ask yourself, why am I giving up? What is the thing? What are the things that I don't like about this language? You might actually want to push through a little bit more and maybe you will overcome the issues that you have. So what I would recommend is take a short break and then come back to this language after some time and try again. If you still don't like it, it's perfectly fine. It's not like the whole world is watching you learning. That's absolutely okay to stop learning if you don't like it. But I think often people get stuck at some point and then they say, I give up because I don't know what to do, how to progress further, I don't like it. But maybe you just need a short break, maybe you just need to come back with a fresh mind, and then you will push through and you will enjoy learning that language again. The most important question that you need to ask yourself when selecting a new programming language is, what is my goal? Why am I doing this? Do I want to become better at my current job? Do I want to find a new job? Do I do it for fun, which is also a good reason? Do I want to learn something completely different to expand my horizons? That's also fine. Depending on your goal, you will have different selection process. Depending on your goal, you will have different criteria. And depending on your goal, the list of languages that after some time you will narrow down to will be very different. The first potential reason is that you want to become better at your current job. Now you have 2 options. You can either go vertically deeper into the domain that you already know, or you can go horizontally broader, learning something that's not directly what you're doing, but something related. The first option, vertical, means that you are going to be more of a specialist in your current domain. So you're narrowing your choice of languages to some languages that are used in your domain. For example, if you're a web developer that specializes in the front end and you work with JavaScript, you can choose some languages that compile to JavaScript and that are used by front-end developers in general, like TypeScript. And if you're writing some enterprise applications, then possibly you're using something like C# or Java. If you're using Java, then you might want to choose another language that works on JVM, like Kotlin or Scala. Then the second option is the horizontal, where let's say that you are backend developer working on web applications and you use some Python or Go on daily basis, and you want to go more into front-end as well. So then you will be learning something that front-end developers in your company use, like JavaScript or TypeScript. Or the other way around. Again, you're a backend developer and you have also data science team and you want to expand your knowledge so that you can work with them closer. Then you will choose a language that is used in your company by data scientists, which is probably something like Python or R. The second potential reason is that you want to find a new job. Then again, you need to choose the language based on what you want to do. There are different languages that are used in enterprise applications, different languages that are used in game development, embedded systems development. If you're searching for a new job, one of the things that will help you decide what programming language to learn is the popularity of the language. Of course, the obvious choice is to go for the most popular ones. So if you want to work in machine learning, then Python seems obvious. If you want to do front-end development, then JavaScript is the thing to learn. However, remember that the more popular the language is, the more people learn this language, the more people try to get the jobs in this language. So this is kind of a double-edged sword. The less popular languages have fewer job offers, but also fewer candidates. So choosing based on popularity is okay, but you might want to explore the less popular options as well. And the other two reasons why you might want to learn a new programming language are either for fun or to become a better programmer. And I will put them together because I think that the reasoning, the decision-making here might be very similar in both cases. Learning new language will not only help you to have different tools that you can choose in certain situations, but also it might affect how you write code in the languages that you already know. Let me give you an example. For a couple of years, I used to work primarily with Ruby and JavaScript. I was very familiar with both languages. Then a couple of years ago, for some reasons, I decided to pick up Elixir. It's a language that is built kind of on top of Erlang, which has its own virtual machine and very different paradigm than Ruby and JavaScript. And while I was learning Elixir and I started using it to solve different problems, I've noticed that the knowledge of this language, that the things that I learned there impacted the ways in which I write Ruby or JavaScript code as well. Elixir is a functional programming language. And because I have to deal with immutability there, because the language is very concurrency friendly, I started writing my Ruby code in a more functional way. On the other hand, a year ago, I had to pick up PHP. And while it's a decent programming language, especially with the recent changes in version 7 and 8, learning PHP didn't make me think in different ways. It didn't enlighten me in any way. It's just a decent language that is yet another tool that I can use when I find a good use case. This is probably because PHP doesn't have a lot of new concepts besides the one that I already learned previously in different programming languages. So that's why I recommend choosing some language that is very different from the ones that you already know. If you've been working with dynamically typed language, choose a static one. If you've been working with functional languages, choose imperative one. If you've been working with general programming languages, maybe choose some domain-specific language. Don't be afraid to choose a niche language. You know, something that doesn't go into the top 20 most popular languages in the world. Something that you can't easily find on the TIOBE language index unless you scroll down the page. Niche languages are often very fun. There are a lot of thoughts that are put into different programming languages that do not become crazy popular. The authors of these languages are very often experienced programmers who just find issues with the tools that they are currently using, and they come up with some ideas and they think, maybe I can come up with something that will not have this problem. And then they create some languages that solve these particular problems, while maybe introducing other ones. Let me give you a few examples. If you want to explore some front-end web development languages, besides going for the obvious ones like JavaScript or TypeScript, you can go with something different. You can go with something less popular, like Elm or ClojureScript or Rescript. For general programming, besides Python or C#, you can go with Neem or Rust or Clojure. And if you want to go with something completely different than the usual popular imperative languages, you can give a try to Haskell or Prolog. Both of them are very different from what we are normally used to. Now, once you stated your goal, once you know why you want to learn a new language, what you want to achieve, you should pay attention to a couple of different things. First, obviously, the features of the language. Does the language have the things that you want to learn? Is the language really used in the domains that you want to learn? If you want to learn a functional language, see whether the language that you are looking at is actually functional or whether it only supports functional paradigm as one of many paradigms. These are different things. Next, check the documentation. See whether there are instructions about how the language can be installed, whether it will actually work on your operating system. Check the quality of the documentation. Next thing, check the documentation. Make sure that the website of the language includes basic tutorials. Make sure that it has installation instructions. Make sure that you actually can install language without any problems on your operating system. Check if there are some link to some external tutorials. Maybe there are some playgrounds where you can try the language online. Make sure that the documentation is decent. Because if the language doesn't have good documentation, you will be getting very frustrated very early. Whenever something doesn't work, you will be Googling and going to Stack Overflow, asking questions. And if you choose a niche language, then it might take a little bit of time to get the answers. By the way, if you notice that something is missing in the documentation while learning a language, it's a nice opportunity to contribute to open source. Check whether there is a repository with that documentation, see whether maybe you can help, you can contribute, you can fix some issues, even fixing typos, adding some changes with the language upgrade, adding some minor improvements is very valuable. If many people contribute small things, then a big thing will be achieved. Next, see the tooling related to the language. See whether your text editor has some plugin that supports the syntax highlighting for that language. If not, either you would have to write your own or you would have to do without syntax highlighting, which is very annoying. See what libraries are available there. If you want to build some desktop application, make sure that there is a library that will allow you to add the GUI on top of the application that you will be working on. Again, this is where the popular languages usually win because they have tons of tooling around. But there are a lot of passionate people that support the smaller languages, the less popular languages. And you will be surprised how many different libraries and tools you can find around the niche languages. And the last thing, check the community. See whether there are some places where you can go and register and meet the people who are also passionate about the language that you want to pick. A lot of languages these days have some Slack servers, some Discord servers, some discourse forums. Some of them have IRC, where you can still go and ask questions. Check how the community reacts to beginners. Make sure that you are picking a language where if you ask a newbie question, people won't attack you for that. Because nobody wants to be afraid to ask questions. There are lots of languages that are very friendly towards newbies. And a good community, a community that is welcoming towards beginners, is a great asset of the language. What I would also recommend is when you look at certain languages, check whether there are some related languages that are newer. Well, newer languages are not necessarily better than the old ones. And we have C programming language that is still very popular and very widely used. There are certain languages that are a good introduction into certain family of languages. For example, we have Lisp family of languages. There are a lot of them. There's Common Lisp, there's Scheme, there's Racket, and more and more. I think that a good place to start getting into Lisp is Clojure. Clojure works on Java virtual machine, so if you have JVM installed, if you work with Java or Scala, You already have the virtual machine that you can use to run Clojure code. Then Clojure offers you access to the Java library, so you have a lot of tooling around it. And finally, it is a modern language that has a lot of great features. And while it is built on top of the principles from years ago, I think that it's a good introduction and maybe even a good final place for you. Maybe the Clojure will be the only list that you ever learn, and that's fantastic. For me, Elixir was a great introduction to the concepts behind Erlang. Elixir has some nice level of abstractions on top of the Erlang tooling. It is easier to use. It has a lot of libraries that I feel in Erlang are not that great. And while I've never learned Erlang itself properly, I just did some very basic programming there, I understand a lot of concepts and I understand all the ideas behind Erlang just because I learned Elixir. And the last thing I want to say is, when choosing a new programming language, ignore the syntax. I know that this is usually the first thing that we programmers notice when we look at the code. And while certain languages have very unfamiliar, very different syntax than what we're used to, the syntax itself shouldn't keep us away from exploring the language. This is just a surface. There are a lot of things underneath that are worth exploring, that are worth understanding. And if we just leave something and skip it because of the syntax, we might be missing a lot. I know that it's tough not to take syntax into account because sometimes it really looks unfriendly. Well, hey, eventually it's just the syntax. You can get used to that. If the tooling is great, if the community is great, if the language offers a lot, pushing through this weird, unfamiliar syntax might be worth it. Alright, that's it for today. I hope that you enjoyed this episode and that you will find it easier now to choose your next programming language. In the next episode, I'm coming back to the idea that I started with in episode 2. What is good code? In that episode, I talked about some general characteristics of good code. And this time, I want to go a bit deeper and show some more specific examples to show some more specific attributes and characteristics of good code. Stay tuned and see you in the next episode.